Wait a second. That ain't no Mopar engine.
Well, sure it is. Kinda.
Hi, I'm Jamie. This is Dead Dodge Garage, and this is the spare Perkins P4C for Perky, my 1959 diesel-powered Plymouth taxi.
Perky's got to be one of my most popular projects of ever. And small wonder, this thing's awesome. Just this badge on the quarter panel is probably one of the coolest things on planet Earth. In previous videos on this car, I learned some stuff. I tuned it up a little bit. I got it running what I thought was probably the best it ever could, and I took it for a highway cruise, where it maxed out at about 65 miles an hour, exploded oil all over the side of the highway, ran out of fuel, and then turned out to have a totally blown and destroyed head gasket, among other things. And when I say other things, well, stuff got kind of ugly. In the last video on this project, after countless attempts at removing the cylinder head, I finally did that, only to discover it is scrap metal. It's cracked, it's destroyed, it's rusted, it's really, really bad. Even before finally learning that, there were various other casualties along the way, like this, or these poor valve springs, or the broken cam followers, the snapped head studs, etc. Many commenters had interesting and unique ideas for engine swaps to put Perky back on the road, like a Hemi, or a Slant 6, or a big block Chrysler. But I'm fully committed to keeping Perky Perky. It has to be powered by a Perkins, or it just won't be the same. It won't have the same character, and to keep it fully real with you, as I believe the kids are saying, it also wouldn't be worth as much. When you own the one and only something, you don't throw the thing that makes it the one and only away and slap a Chevy small block in it or whatever. What Perky needs right now at a minimum is a brand new cylinder head. A brand new cylinder head probably doesn't exist, but a good used one would be a close second option. What would be even better than that, though, is a complete replacement engine to start with, a correct replacement. So isn't it great that I already have one? It's almost like the longtime owner Ed that restored the car knew that this thing was going to need an engine at some point. So he found this one in a junkyard somewhere in a Dodge that rusted in half and saved it for Perky. Now, as I've mentioned, Perky has been a very popular project on this channel, and multiple people have wanted to help with this project if they can. The way some have chosen to do that is by sending me a link for every single old Perkins engine they see on the internet. One notable example, there is a guy that revived a Perkins-powered welder, which is super cool. But that engine, like every other one I've ever been sent, is not the right one. What we need is this relatively rare P series, the P4C specifically, with the C standing for high RPM. The Perkins P series, being the P4 4-cylinder and P6 6-cylinder, came to exist in the early 1950s. They were around for quite a while, most typically used in industrial and agricultural applications, specifically Massey Ferguson tractors. I've only just learned Mahindra actually bought this engine design and put it into production from 75 to 1989 for their small trucks. I don't know about you, but I find it hilarious when I find my own pictures in Google searches for peculiar things like this. Anyway, I don't know what company is responsible for the idea, but at some point, someone realized that the P4 small compact diesel engine was a suitable choice for diesel converting various automobiles, like Land Rovers, for example. This is a manual for that conversion, and I can't help but notice this thing is wearing the same Perkins badge the Perky is. Apparently, the 4-cylinder inline design provided balance and smooth operation. The P-Series lived long enough to be reclassified under Perkins' new nomenclature as the 4.192 engine. And the great news for me is because these things lived in those Massey tractors for so long, rebuild parts are still available today. I was able to get a head gasket set when I thought that's all Perky's engine needed. Now that I know we probably need a bit more than that, all of those parts are available too. Now I say we need more than that, but I don't actually know what we do need for this replacement engine. Today, I'm hoping to find that out. Now, as I mentioned, my understanding is that this thing came out of a totally horribly rusty Dodge car. I don't remember what year that car was. I think I've seen a picture of it on the internet. You can see pictures of a lot of stuff related to Perky on the internet, which is pretty cool. The history has been well documented for like 20 years now. There are some notable differences from the original Perky engine. One thing I noticed is the rear plate on the head here has a heater connection. The other one just has a blanking plate. There's an extra line going into the intake right here through this plate. I assume that was for ether. This thing does also have the connection for the preheat starting system thingy. The engine's wearing the same CAV injection pump. It looks terrible. The coolant connections and setup on the front are a little bit different too. There's some kind of switch here. No idea what that is. The thermostat housing looks similar, but not the same. There's some kind of oil switch thing over here that Perky doesn't have.
Also, whatever this came out of must have had dual batteries. This engine does have the same goofy pneumatic governor setup. You can see this diesel, unlike most diesels, has a throttle body. It has a similar gigantic starter. The one on Perky now has been rebuilt. We're definitely going to be saving that one. Not like we're going to throw away this good core though. On the back, we have the same type of bell housing that's used in Perky. This is for the Chrysler 3-speed transmission. It's cool we have this. You know, we might need to Perkins swap something someday. It has the same style engine mounts as the 59 car, although they're equally destroyed. The fuel injection lines are missing, but the injectors themselves are present here. And someone cared enough about them to cover the inlets with foil. I don't know if that's because they thought they were actually good or that's just good practice. I don't know what the purpose of these lines are. They look like return lines, but they dump into this common tube that just dumps on the ground. I'm glad the tube is here because that's yet another piece on Perky that was slightly damaged. The valve cover off of Perky is actually broken around one of these bolt holes. It was using a big giant washer to hold it down. This one's in better shape. Gonna have to polish that or something. In addition to the special bell housing, the special car oil pan with the mid sump is in place as well. That's gotta be a pretty rare piece. There's still oil in it. That oil doesn't look watery. It doesn't look, well, any worse than diesel oil typically does. That's a good first sign. The basic plan here is to tear this engine down and see what's what. I have zero intentions of just assuming this thing is good and throwing it in that car. There is no reason to do that. Again, I already have a head gasket set, so we're covered for all of that stuff, but I know there's gonna be more. Here's one thing I noticed right away. The front seal is totally crispy and destroyed. I've actually already had the timing cover off, so we can just do this real quick. Behind that timing cover, we find this crazy contraption. It's a triple row roller style timing chain. Now this chain was actually totally floppy and loose when I first saw it. I unstuck this tensioner myself and got that tightened up. You could tell it was running that way for like a while, judging by the horrible grooves in this gear case here. That is a cam button. As you can see, that's like a spring steel piece that pushes on the front of the cam gear. That tells me there's no retainer plate behind this gear, and this cam is able to walk out slightly. This cover gasket almost isn't totally ruined, but it is though. One big reason I want to dig into this engine, besides verifying it's worth using and trying to make it pretty, is to replace every gasket and seal in it. You see, like many other diesels of this type, these things are legendary for vomiting oil everywhere. And if I can avoid that, at least for a little while, that would be a really good thing. Oil slinger. We'll make sure to put that back on. Let's talk tool sizes real fast, because this old English engine presents a problem for me there. See, I've got standard American or SAE sets and metric sets, but I don't have anything that actually fits this engine. I learned that the hard way, taking apart the last one. I don't know anything about British fasteners, so I did some looking online, and I believe that these are British standard sizes. Anyway, here's a random example. These nuts that secure the fuel injectors down on these head studs. 5/8, too big. 15 millimeter, ever so slightly too small, although as you can see, I did get it to go on there. I happened to find this handy conversion chart online, and I'm pretty confident what we're looking at on this particular fastener is this. British standard, I don't know what the F stands for, 3/8 or Whitworth 5/16. What do those sizes refer to? I have zero idea. Obviously, I'm gonna use the utmost of care, as I always do. And try really hard not to ruin any more unobtainium fasteners. I found on the other engine that there tend to be closer matches in the metric set, so that's what I'm gonna be using mostly. I don't know why I'm starting with injectors, but it seemed like the thing to do. I need more hands, and maybe a short extension. Also some fire. You know, people ask me all the time why I don't use a big boy torch, an oxyacetylene torch. Well, I have one right here, and I use it when I think I need to, but this makes big boy flames that ruin stuff. And again, I would like to limit the ruining as much as possible here. Dude, I'm about to throw this one too. Baby torch and some PB did the trick. If you've been following along with this saga, you know removing the head from the first Perkins engine was the really, really difficult part. I broke multiple head studs in attempts at doing that. So far, so good. I didn't snap any of the ones clamping down the injectors, but the night is young. Loosening the little pigtail lines, which you don't actually have to do. They pull out of this main section, so you can just leave them on the injectors, but they go in at a funky angle, and loosening them seems like the way. An 11mm wrench barely fits on these. Okay, I slightly launched the #1 injector. 3 and 4 are loose, 2 is really happy in there.
You know they're all gonna look like that down there. Oh yeah, we're off to a great start.
Remember a minute ago when I said the night was young? That was a lie. It's actually past dinner time. I'm gonna soak the number 2 injector and get back to this in the morning. They've done studies, you know. 60% of the time, it works every time. Obviously, this project is very different than the engines I normally work on here because it has fuel injectors at all. I'd wager that a good cross-section of the DDG viewership understands diesels, but I'll give you the quick broad strokes version in case you don't. Because these engines are compression fired, there is no spark. The heat made by compressing air in the chambers is what lights the diesel fuel. That fuel has to be injected at the correct time to lead to combustion happening the way we want. Of course, these days, that injection timing is handled by a computer, and injector control is electronic. But back in the bad old days, this was done mechanically. The part responsible for building the necessary pressure and then directing that pressure into the injector nozzles at the correct timing is this fuel injection pump. These generally come in a couple styles. This is an inline pump. It kind of resembles a smaller inline 4 bolted to the side of this inline 4. There were also rotary pumps used by various makes and manufacturers on various engines. Those tend to resemble a distributor, but with fuel instead of spark. The timing can be adjusted on these things too. I don't know if you can see those little hash marks there and the slotted plate that is attached to the drive on this injection pump. But if you loosen those bolts and spin those two pieces, you can effect a timing change. I did that on Perky, and it yielded a little bit more power. You may notice that the injectors are off to one side and facing straight down, not actually pointed at the tops of the pistons. And that is because this is what's known as an indirect injection diesel.
Looking at the underside of the ruined cylinder head, we can see the fuel is injected into this area up in here. This is called the pre-chamber. Once it's lit in that area, it comes out this way to affect pressure on the piston top. Indirect injection turns out to be a less than stellar way to make horsepower with a diesel. Think of every gutless turd diesel you've ever experienced in your life. Yeah, it was probably an indirect engine, like the 7.3 IDI, for example, or the 6.5 GM diesel. Same idea. In some of these engine families, those pre-chambers or cups were actually replaceable parts.
Not so on our lowly Perkins engine. It's just a hole.
Now, direct injection was a feature used on larger diesel engines, and it did slowly find its way to smaller engines as well. The 5.9 Cummins, direct injected engine. 7.3 Power Stroke, direct injected. Duramax, of course, also direct injected. On all of those modern diesel engines used in pickups I just mentioned, instead of a pre-chamber, there's a sort of cup built into the top of the piston. Here's a set for a Duramax, here's a set for a Power Stroke, and here's a set for a Cummins. They're basically all the same.
It's important to understand that because of this indirect injected design, our little Perkins here is always going to be limited on horsepower. We could probably make a little bit more than stock, possibly with some extra atmosphere forced in there, but it's never going to be a massive powerhouse. Though countless people have told me to get the injectors for Perky rebuilt, the ones that I took off the engine already were rebuilt. We're going to save these for good cores and go with those ones. In the future, these could well be overhauled, tuned, modified, whatever. Time to pull the valve cover. Strangely, didn't even have to hit this one with a hammer. Yeah, I mean, it's gross, but it's better than Perky. I think it might even fit in the ultrasonic tank. Nice. This is interesting. There's some screen material hanging down under the oil cap. It kind of looks like that was some sort of screening cup, and most of it's gone. I'm not seeing any more of that material in here, though. Maybe it's just a shield to keep oil from going straight at the gasket? I don't know. Lots of interesting things to take in here. The biggest one would be these rockers. They're crazy looking. They're super long. They look similar in construction to the Slant 6 rocker arms. They have similar oil passages through the top. There's a feed hole here in the middle coming out of the shaft. Yes, these are mounted on a shaft like our beloved Mopars. And then that lubrication goes toward the cam follower and also toward the valve stem. The rockers are all separated by springs, so it's basically a Hemi. Notice that instead of being fed by one of the rocker stands, there's actually a separate oil line that comes out of this hole to feed that rocker shaft. Again, this is a very simplistic industrial engine, and one feature of that is basically all of the oil routing happens outside of the engine. This main feed pipe, for example, goes back here, and I believe feeds the main bearings. There's also an external line here that crosses over the engine. I believe this feeds the camshaft tunnel, and then this separate line comes up into the head to feed the rockers.
Here's something interesting I noticed on Perky's engine as well as this one. You can see here this engine was painted silver. Incidentally, factory Chrysler engines were also silver in this time. This is not a factory engine, by the way. Everybody knows that, right? This was like a day 2 installation by an aftermarket company. Anyway, under the silver paint, you can see this reddish, orangish, rustish paint showing through. I don't know if that's because these engines were pulled off of another line and then converted into automotive engines and resprayed or what. It should be noted that the examples of engines I'm finding in these period Massey Ferguson tractors, which were of course red, well, they're gray. But there's evidence of the same orange paint under the silver back here, and again, Perky's engine showed the same thing, so this must have been normal. I noticed this little stamping, chromidium. If you punch that word into Google, the stupid AI thing just tells you you're a moron and you're spelling chromium wrong. It turns out chromidium was a British company's trade name for a special type of cast iron containing a high level of nickel and chrome. It's supposed to be stronger and wear less than typical cast iron. At least that's what this random forum comment says. Another commenter claims that seeing that logo on a Perkins engine means that it has chromard liners. If this simply denotes the type of liner that was installed in the block after it was cast, I don't know why this logo would be on the block and the cylinder head. But I'm no expert. These engines do have some type of serial number. It's found on this pad here on the passenger side of the block, or the right side of the block, I guess I should say, in case there are Europeans watching. On Perky's original engine, the number is 2103248. The number on this replacement engine is 2600582. Anyway, back to this valve train. This engine does not use a push rod. Instead, it uses these cam followers. The camshaft is raised really high in the block. It sits right here in this tunnel directly under where the cylinder head mounts. So it's not a very long distance to bridge between the two pieces. The cam followers look like this. They're not supposed to be two-piece, but don't worry about that. You can see the wide foot there that sits on the camshaft. And then this is the piece that the rocker sits on. It's just a nut and a bolt threaded into the end of this thing. That is where you make your lash adjustment. You can't remove them without taking that nut loose and backing the bolt all the way out. The corners on that hex just barely catch the holes that these things ride in when you try to drop them out the bottom. That means they stay in place during cylinder head installation and removal. The rocker shaft is mounted to these 4 studs. These are not head studs. They're threaded into the head. Number 2 and number 4 here also have shoulder threads that mount the valve cover. Going with 15 mil for these fasteners too. Incidentally, I'm using a Mac deep socket here. The non-impact socket would not fit. The impact socket fits perfectly. I've always been a big proponent of bagging and tagging hardware. It's the best possible way to ensure that all the little nuts and bolts go back where they belong. I have to admit that for Chrysler engines, I usually don't bother anymore. I just throw them all in a big box. But this Perkins engine is uncharted territory. So you better believe I'm tagging every nut and bolt that comes out of this thing. I'm also taking lots and lots of reference photos as I go along, which is another essential step. 12mm was a little loose on the oil feed line, but it did the trick. And there we have a rocker shaft assembly. You have to lift it perfectly square off of those studs. That is greasy and disgusting. You better believe that'll be going for a ride in the ultrasonic cleaner during the rebuild phase. Here you can see with the rockers out of the way, these followers just kind of sit here loose. On the other engine, I wired all those together with mechanics wire because I didn't know they couldn't fall out. I can only imagine they selected some special bolts for this job. It kind of looks like they just milled them smooth and threw them in here. Notice the nice pattern on there, showing evidence of the follower spinning. Most of these are looking pretty good, except for that one. And that one at the front. Working on getting various ancillary bits off the cylinder head now. This 13mm wrench barely fit on here. Had to install it with a hammer. Somewhere an English person is laughing at me. Maybe a couple of them. There's a temperature switch for you. Nice. Yeah. Don't think we'll be using this. It's quite different. It's very important that this plate does not get ruined because the one off of Perky was corroded to bits. Barely sealed, and it's very, very broken now. This one looks really good. Just a tiny bit of corrosion in there. I'm gonna pull the intake now. First, I need to get this pneumatic line that goes from the throttle body down here to the governor unhooked. Interestingly, this one has been cut right here and repaired with this little section of rubber. It's also rusting to bits, so I don't think we'll be retaining that. Boop. I discussed this goofy pneumatic governor setup, the injection pump in general, and everything else about this fuel system in a previous video, which you could go watch. I'm not going to cover all of that here. Suffice to say, it's strange, and I don't really want to stick with it moving forward.
The governor diaphragm on the car when I got it was shot. I swapped a better one on there and got it kind of sort of working the way it's supposed to, but it's still not great. That good governor diaphragm came off of this rebuilt injection pump in a bag that was in the trunk of the car when I got it. We might end up switching to this one in the future. For now, I'm going to use the known good fuel system that was on the previous engine. Another YouTube channel called Area Diesel does a lot of work on pumps and such. Enough commenters on my channel and on their channel suggested that we work together that they emailed me, and we may well figure out something in the future for this fuel system. There's the intake manifold off. It's only held in place with 2 big bolts, that one and that one. Once I loosened the second bolt, it removed itself with gusto. Oil crossover line coming out. Removed that injector dump line thingy. I suppose it's finally time to try and remove this cylinder head. I've got everything important out of the way. I did consider pulling the exhaust manifold and that water pipe, but I really don't want to deal with that at all if I can avoid it. I'm heating these with a torch carefully. I am not going to torch the valve springs on this head. We really need those to not be ruined. Although this engine's been sitting for many years, it really doesn't look as terrible as the other ones, so I think these are all just going to come loose. Probably shouldn't say stuff like that. On the other engine, all the ones that were seized and totally horrible and breaking and what have you were here on the outside. See, these are under the valve cover, so they're constantly well lubricated with nasty black tar engine oil. These, they get hit by rainwater, of course, but they're just generally open to atmosphere, so they corrode. Luckily, I got all of them broken free by hand. The ones under the valve cover broke free instantly, no trouble. These out here all took a little bit more force. But nothing's broken yet. This happened on the other engine too in a couple positions, but some of these studs actually came loose with the nuts. That's a good sign. If they're not seized in the head, well, the head might actually come off when we try to lift it. All of the head nuts are off. Nothing over here is in the way at all. So there are no fasteners. And at this point, the head should just pop off magically, right? Well, if you've been following along with the Perky saga, you know that's probably not going to happen. Let's put some pressure on that thing using gravity. Whee! Yeah. I'm going to start with less violent means to try and loosen these things up in the head, and we'll see if we get lucky here. We probably won't. This is a common problem with these Perkins engines. It's been dealt with by many tractor mechanics over the decades, but it's not an exclusive Perkins problem. Matter of fact, there are all kinds of British engines that do exactly the same thing, like the Jaguar inline 6 dual overhead cam Hemi engine, for example. Did I say Jaguar or Jaguar? I don't remember. You know, from a certain vantage point, it might seem really silly to do all of this to an engine that might be perfectly fine. I just can't trust it. Oh yes, the magic smoke maker. What a delightful smell. We definitely like the sizzling sounds. That's obviously stuff around the stud getting warm. Oh, in case you don't know, this is a mini ductor. 2, I guess. A flameless heat system. It's an inductive heater. Don't wear jewelry or have a heart monitor while you're trying to use one of these things. I like that it also melts itself. This is a tool a bunch of people recommended that I buy for the Perky project. Thing is, I already had one. I've had this for like 9 years? I just never think to use it. Heat, spray, beat with a hammer. And don't forget to drink third coffee. Invariably, someone in the comments is going to ask why I don't try using compression to knock this head off. I will remind you that the fuel injectors have been removed, and the fasteners that held them down to the heads have to be loose for this operation to be successful. With these giant holes open, compression doesn't exist. I'd have to rig up some way to plug those holes and then crank it over, and it's just not worth the trouble. Shoving rope or string down through the hole left by the injector to fill the cylinder and give the piston something to push against on the head would also be an option, but I'm not going to do it. Well, I wouldn't worry about that at all. Ha ha! It's coming off! I gently applied a pry bar in this area, and it's just separating. This is fantastic. I'll do the same thing as I did with the other engine now that it's moving. I'll knock it back down in the front. I'll spray around these studs some more, and we'll go up and down and get this thing loose. I am going to have to figure out some way to put upward pressure back here. There you can see the gap is closed again. That's after dropping the weight and then tapping here with the dead blow. Yeah, it's not just going to fall off of there. There you go. Got a little bit of a purchase here. Yeah. That's totally working. I am so proud of myself right now. As I understand, the move with the Jag engines that have the same problem and others is to just let them dangle like this for a while and hope that eventually the parts separate. Don't really have time for that. There's a fire alarm going off over there somewhere. Anyway, I sprayed all the studs more, and now I'm just going front to back, prying a little bit, and it's coming right off. Really hoping this thing doesn't like clunk down and break my cart. Notice I am not prying at the actual sealing surfaces. Right here, we've got the lift hook and then the oil filter bracket. That's a big gnarly steel piece. Maybe it's cast, I don't know. Anyway, I'm prying between those two carefully. And then on this nut right here on the rear water plate. Anytime now. Obviously, it's lifting the engine at a bit of an angle, so that's probably part of why it won't just pop off of there. Watch your toesies. Please let go. This is quite the process. Nope. Would you just let go, please? It doesn't want to. Get out of there. This might do bad things in a minute. Yeah. Oh, there you go. It just went a little cockeyed. Oh. Okay. Yeah. Now what do I do with it? I don't know. Oh, not that. Don't do that. That's bad. Stay. Oh, no. Hopefully that didn't ruin anything. Yep. It's a cylinder head. Ah, it's fine. That is what's supposed to happen. It should be challenging, but it should come apart. I noticed on the other engine that these do not use any kind of dowel pins. I've just seen this though. The middle stud has a larger shoulder. We can see the cam followers here sticking out of the bottom of the head, of course. Notice they're kind of sitting at different heights. Some of these have notable carbon buildup that prevents them from sliding down. Mostly they just kind of fall like that one. This one's a little gummy. Yeah, there you go. Just a little bit of schmutz in there. Let's try and keep the big chunks out of here. That engine number is actually stamped in this location too. Admire the fact that these things use a multi-layer copper head gasket. This one's looking a little goobered at this corner. So is the block casting. These gaskets could be reusable in theory. I have a replacement. We're not going to try and save it. Obviously, it's kind of rough looking anyway. There is some evidence of combustion getting around that gasket in this area. Notice these cylinders are kind of separated in pairs. There's a bigger gap right here down the middle. Here's the back side of that gasket. Looking pretty good. A little bit of leakage there. Notice this is a pretty typical 5 head fastener per cylinder design, except there's one extra one at the back and one extra one at the front. So these two holes have 6. Not sure why they did that. Notice the slimy buildup on these studs, particularly the orange rusty stuff on this one and this one. This gunk buildup on the studs is what locks these heads in place. Essentially, there's a gap between the stud and the head casting, and it ends up filled over the years by carbon and rust and random debris. Also note these things are soaked all the way down with the PB blaster I sprayed on them. And people keep telling me PB is no good. I'm wondering if the damage to this corner of the deck and the scratches here under the head gasket are evidence that someone's been here before. I'm gonna have to clean this deck surface thoroughly. I sure would like to pull all those studs out to do that, but I don't know if it's gonna be worth the effort. Anyway, with the head off, we can now look down into the cylinders. You know, things are looking pretty good here. I see some light scuffing and some very mild rust evidence here in number 4. Number 1 is pretty much identical minus the rust. I don't think I've ever tried spinning this engine. Anyway, it does do that, thankfully. Didn't realize the flywheel was resting on the thing. With that issue solved, it spins really easily. A quick and easy way to check for loose rod bearings is to rock the crank back and forth like this. I hear no noise at all. What a great sign. Cylinders 2 and 3 look pretty much identical. Very nice. I rolled the engine over to TDC 1 and started scraping some pistons. Here's what number 1 looks like after a bit of a scrape with a razor blade and then a wipe with brake clean on a rag. Notice the circle here. It kind of looks like valve contact from the intake valve. Number 4 is exactly the same. Maybe that was valve contact. These pistons are pretty much right at the top of the holes, like just a couple thou below zero deck.
Given that the head is essentially flat except for around the valves and the opening from the pre-chamber, this means the piston to head clearance is very tight. We've got what I believe to be just the right amount of piston rock here. You can see the things moving around on the rings. It's not excessive, it doesn't make horrible noise, but it does move. With everything on the block looking great so far, I guess it's finally time to look at the cylinder head. The very surprised looking cylinder head. I am seeing some pitting right away like the other one, but it's nowhere near as bad. I did a quick little bit of light scraping. Notice it's pretty much just number 2 here that has those pits. I really don't know what causes that. On the other head, when it looked similar but like 1,000 times worse, various people said they thought this might be from moisture. I think if that was the case, we would see evidence of coolant in here. Perhaps some coloration, perhaps it would be wet, perhaps some of this horrible carbon buildup would have been steam cleaned off of the piston, but it wasn't. I just scraped this one. It seemed exactly the same as number 1 and 4. Still need to do number 3 there. Notice all of these pistons have a number marking, 1 through 4, front to back of course, but then also a letter marking, if you can see that. Number 1 piston says B, number 2 says B, number 3 says C, number 4 says B again. My assumption is that when assembled, Perkins used a similar system that Chrysler used. They had different size finished pistons for different size finished bore sizes. A great feature of this engine family is something that it shares with a lot of bigger diesel engines, and that is a replaceable piston liner. What this means is when the engine's completely walled out, you tear it all down, you knock these liners out, you knock new ones in there with fresh pistons and rings, and away you go with a completely fresh engine. The possibility of having to do that here was never far from my mind. But as nice as all this looks, yeah, I don't think we're going to have to. Okay, remember that whole valve contact thing? I think I just figured out what killed this engine. Or not killed it necessarily, but probably took it off the road. Remember our big gigantic chain here? As mentioned, when I first got in here, it was loose. It was scraping on this timing cover here. I've currently got this tensioner slid back. This thing was jammed in a position that did not fully tighten the chain. I unjammed it myself and got the chain tensioned properly, but obviously the damage was kind of already done. The gear case is messed up there. But up here, there's some kind of guide. I don't know if this was nylon or what, but you can see it's so worn, we're looking at rivets sticking through. Somewhere, I've got a digital copy of the service manual for this engine, and I need to go find that, but I've figured out the timing marks. We know the crank is in the correct position, obviously by this, but also the woodruff key pointing straight up. This gear, which drives the injection pump, has a mark. It's a little arrow right there. There's a matching arrow here, and those two are still aligned. The arrow for the cam gear should be pointed at this matching arrow too, but it's not. It's this way. I did find a graphic online of a very similar but later Perkins engine design. Instead of having this chain set up, there's a giant gear right here in the middle that all of these connect to. Anyway, it seems painfully obvious we're going to need a chain set here. The chain itself, and then maybe this guide, if it's replaceable at all, I don't know. No, it is not. You can get chains, and you can get rebuild kits for the tensioners, and that's it. The tensioner will work. It needs a cleaning for sure. I'm not sure right at the moment how you take this off, though. Maybe you knock the safety wire off these screws and just take the tensioner apart. I could also unfold these safety tabs and unbolt the cam gear. That would pop out, and then the chain would just kind of fall off. You can't do that with this gear. It's a press fit. I'm hoping not to disturb that. I thought this was some kind of oil pump, but I'm pretty sure it's just a drive adapter to run the injection pump. It also drives the engine oil pump using a 90-degree shaft that's under this cover and goes down through a passageway into the bottom of the block. Looking in Perky's very dead original engine now, as you know, this thing has seen some stuff. Yes, it's rusting at this point, but most of this nightmare fuel was in here when I first got into it. Strange there's less buildup on the piston tops. You know what I don't see? Any evidence of valve contact. This engine spins so nicely, I accidentally backed it up some while trying to loosen those bolts. I came back to the flywheel teeth here to crank it back to TDC. I decided to check and see if there was a timing line through this hole. Yes, there is. The gear is just that outside section. There are a couple different sets of bolt holes here. I want to make sure this gear gets lined up the same way as it came off when I put this back together. I don't know if this is a square pattern or if it can only be installed one direction, but I marked the bolt holes that were used and I added the arrow to the outside section here. Now I should be able to pull it off and nothing horrible will happen. So many teeth. At this point, the camshaft should come right out. It doesn't really want to easily. I don't know if you could tell what that is holding it in. It's suction. Careful. There you go.
I could thread a bolt into one of the holes on here to help guide this thing, but because the deck is so open above the cam, I could just get a hand to the back and guide it out that way. Yep, it's a camshaft. Look at that gigantic front bearing surface. It looks pretty darn good, actually. It's greasy, obviously. And there are little markings by every one of these lobes. Here's the rear journal. Smaller than the front one, still pretty big. The middle one is interesting. Notice that slot? What that does is connects that feed hole coming in from the pump to the hole going up to the head. In that way, it's able to time lubrication going to the rocker shaft. It doesn't get full-time oiling. It only sends pressurized oil through during the brief moment when this top hole is connected to this bottom hole by that slot. This is just a solid bushing. Oil is able to pool in this tunnel. The drainage slot here is not down at the bottom. It's up about here. That means oil needs to pool to this point before it'll drain back to the crankcase. So everything from like here up is supposed to be submerged in oil. That means the lobes are constantly dipping into it and keeping all of this stuff nice and lubricated. That lubrication setup is so simple and rudimentary, it's almost funny. I don't know what, if anything, this design uses to keep oil away from the valve guides. Whatever it is, it doesn't work very well. You can see there's a good bit of oil down here. Decided to do a valve leakage test with some brake clean. There's something I didn't want to know. All right, I mean, it's leaking. It's not the worst I've ever seen by far, but that's not good. Some of our compression is going to be going out around that valve. I bet you they're all about the same. Yeah, they're all pretty bad. I think number 2 here is actually the worst, though. Remember, number 2 is the chamber with all that pitting damage, so that does kind of make sense. We now know for a fact that all 4 of these intake valves have had little parties with the tops of the pistons. Because of that, it's totally possible that they're bent. The good news here is they extend straight down toward the piston, so they contacted evenly. Hopefully that means they're kind of sort of not bent. There were no corresponding marks for the teeny tiny exhaust valves. I can't test them with the head hanging at this angle. I'm just going to assume every one of these needs to be touched. We're going to be breaking this head down fully. And doing some cleaning. So much cleaning. That's supposed to be a hole. With the cam out of there, I was able to vacuum all of the residual oil and the little bits of debris that had gotten down from cleaning the deck. I've got the cylinder head set out of the way on the corner of the big bench now. Going through this thing is going to be its whole own self-contained adventure. We're not going to touch that today. Here's that big, gigantic triple row stretch timing chain out of the hole. Here's a good look at the damage to the gear case. There's the bottom. Note the bits of debris. And here's the top. Yeah, this was some kind of fiber. You know, modern engines with big, gigantic chains use guides very similar to this. You can see there the rivets that the chain was rubbing into. You can see right here how thick that was when it was new. Here's the backside of those rivets on the outside of the gear case. There aren't many pieces we're going to need off the original engine in Perky. I think the gear case may well be one of them. Unfortunately, I did reef on that gear case countless times with a gigantic pry bar. Hopefully it's still worth using. What I'm calling the gear case here could also be called the inner timing cover, I suppose. It's actually 2 pieces, this lower section and then the main cover. It looks to me like it could be pulled off if it was unbolted from the lower one and the timing tensioner here was moved into that area. One problem will be that bolt right there, which is actually a flathead screw that is staked in place. I believe it's done that way because it's right behind the chain, although that bolt's also right behind the chain. Just notice we can get our first glimpse at the pistons and rods through this hole. Admire the fresh liquid leaking down from that gear case. I think that's just some penetrant and brake clean I sprayed on here. Resealing this, truly the best of ideas. Pretty sure this is the number 1 main cap sticking outside of the oil pan and behind that gear cover. I'm pulling this gigantic starter now. This has to be the weirdest starter mounting in the universe. It's just secured to the side of the block with these 2 straps, and it sticks in the hole here. I've got those loose, and as you can see, it just kind of dances around. Every time. I'd say remind me to buy a set of British tools, but, well, I kind of hope to not do too much of this in the future. Yeah. Weird. Okay. That's not light. Ugh. How do you like the cobwebs? Here's a look at this gigantic thing out of the hole. Well, this one's not rusted solid, so that's good. This is actually a CAV part as well. Same company that makes the injection pumps. Can't read much of this. I think this is the battery connection and that's a ground. And here's where it mounts on the side of the block. Even more interesting. Also important note, this strap is rusting to pieces. Hopefully the ones on the car are better. They spin right out of there, scraping big chunks of grime off the side. This thing is just disgusting. It's nothing compared to the one in the car, but that's not saying much. Trying to pull some more stuff off the engine here, like this grody injection pump core. I'm just going to take it off with the mounting pedestal. It's 3 nuts that are super easily accessible right here. Now this is interesting. These things have a timing mark, and for some reason it's currently not lined up at all. I think it's here. Notice I put a mark on there myself. This is, of course, done with the arrows aligning here. Whether that's the correct way to time the pump or not, I don't know yet. It should be noted the drive coupler here on the rebuilt pump in a bag is a different style than the one on here. Tasty! Oh, it's a washer. Interesting, there's a number hand scrawled here behind the injection pump on the side of the block. It doesn't look to me like silver paint ever hit this, so they must have painted them with the pump in place. It's a while later, and I've got the oil pan mostly unbolted. There are a couple troublesome fasteners that I'm going to have to deal with when this thing's dangling in the air. I still need to drain the oil out of the sump anyway, so I guess it's time to just get to that. Now, I'm pulling the pan out and leaving the bell housing for now. I think removing that might be complicated. There are a couple fasteners that are visible, but I think there are actually some coming from the other direction. And if that's the case, to get the bell off, the clutch and flywheel have to come off first. Carefuling. Draining the oil now. The plug here is a square drive and a 1/2-inch wrench actually fit it. Yeah. Yep, that's diesel oil. Thick, very dark, stinky. That is a big chunk of beef. Did I actually get all the bolts out? Yeah. It's got 2 secret bolts at the back. I've managed to get all these fasteners loose with the wrong tools. Getting them torqued again with the wrong tools may prove challenging. The good news is the most critical fasteners here, the nuts that go on the head studs, well, those fit either a 3/4 wrench or a 19mm wrench. So those we can definitely torque properly. Some of the small stuff might be a little tricky. Fast forward to me custom grinding a set of wrenches and sockets for this bad boy. Smash it with a hammer! Oh, that's moving. Nice. I'm hitting the giant sump section on this side with a hammer. And it is coming down. That is quite the piece. Okay. It's like wedged behind the front main cap and in front of the rear one. But it is going. There you go. Okay. All right. Wow. That's a big oil pump and a weird pickup. That is a massive pan. Look at this thing. It's humongous. It's so wide. And it's even wider at the bottom, of course, with that big sump section. Look at this. This is the pickup screen. It's a separate piece from the tube. Kind of just sits there. Obviously, we do have some chunkies down in here. It's not looking too bad so far. Gonna have to clean all of this. Yeah, a bit of sludge. I feel some bits of something. What is that? I don't know. That I think is water. Not much of it though, so that's good. Well, yeah, sludgy and disgusting, but overall, doesn't seem too horrible so far. I'm gonna let that thing dribble into the drain for a little bit there, then we'll take another look. See if we can see any chunkies or anything. This screen screens from below, from the sides, from the top, from everywhere. And then there's a rubber seal on it at the top that's supposed to seal any oil from getting around and straight into the tube. Now we're looking in the bottom of the Perkins. The first thing I notice is everything is massively overbuilt. Look at how chunky these connecting rods and rod caps are. There's a spring on the pickup tube that pushes that pickup down against the pan so it doesn't move around. Here's a look up the number 2 rod at the bottom of the piston. Note these are old school pistons. They are not skirted slipper pistons, whatever the heck those are called. They're just coffee cans with pins through the middle, basically. These rods are just incredibly beefy. But that's pretty typical of diesel engines. Because of the way they operate, basically by constant detonation, everything has to be very strong. Here you can see the sealing area on the number 1 main cap. That's where the oil pan sits, but the cap itself is out here. Small wonder fluid leaks out of that. Pretty sure that shiny thingy up there above the pump is an oil pump bypass valve.
Unlike later engines, this one is in the block instead of in the pump itself.
Well, I'd very much like to get the bell housing off now. As suspected, to do that, the clutch has to come out, which is super dumb. You can see the back sides of a few bolts here going down the side of the block. So I'm pulling the clutch out now. To do this, I'm accessing the bolts right here below the bell housing. Sometimes my socket even fits. There's number 5. Spin the engine over one more time, which again, remarkably easy. And I'll access the last bolt. Now when this bolt comes out, I'm gonna have to catch the clutch. No idea how I'll do that yet. Carefully, I guess. Okay. It's wedged like inside the flywheel. There's that. Pressure plate and disc. Borg and Beck. Flywheel side. This looks good. Okay, that's rusty and horrible. Like really rusty and horrible. Well, if I was really desperate, I could run this. Is that 23 spline? I might actually have a pilot tool for this. Now, to get the flywheel bolts, there are 6 of them.
Because this thing is obviously a race car, there are tie bars with little bend tabs for all of the flywheel bolts. I'll have to come in, pry those down, and then I can loosen the bolts. That pilot has seen some stuff, probably from someone trying to install the transmission at one time after installing this, let's say, new clutch. And I think they missed a couple times. Big giant spacer there with the smaller pilot bushing inside it. I wonder if that's a typical Chrysler pilot. Did manage to get all the little tabs unbent. Turns out these match a 21mm hex. They're quite tight, so I'm gonna go get a big boy impact.
Now I've got 5 out of 6 flywheel bolts out. These are interesting. You saw they were secured with the metal strappy things, but they also have holes for tie wire. Just classic British stuff. Unlike the clutch, this flywheel, I suspect, will be very heavy. Okay. I'm gonna drop this a few inches so it's more in knee catching range, and then we'll hit it with a hammer. Okay. Nice. Yeah. Yeah, it's not light. Oh yeah, buddy. Terrible. That's quite something.
I noticed these bolts coming from the engine side. Those hold on the ring gear. There's our TDC marking. I suspect this bolt pattern is asymmetrical, so it can only go on one way and the mark lines up. That, or is there a pin for this hole? No, there is not. There also isn't any like flange or register to hold this flywheel exactly in position.
This thing is just crazy beefy. I assume they did that intentionally to enhance the flywheel effect. That is, the mass of this flywheel helps to turn the engine at low RPM.
With that out of the way, we can see the rest of the fasteners that hold this bell housing onto the block. Also, at least one spider.
Now it's time to knock the bell housing off, I think. Unlike that flywheel, this thing might not be so heavy. Pretty sure it's made out of aluminum. There you go. Yeah, that's not so bad. Impressive piece. And now we have this, a bare short block. Except it's not fully bare. We still have a crankcase breather, an oil filter housing, a couple mount brackets, and an oil pump and pickup. I'd like to get at least most of these external things off. I think at that point, then I could clean this and start making it all pretty and getting it ready for some fresh paint. I'm planning to use the oil filter housing from the other engine because it looks much nicer than this one. This bracket was broken and like brazed back together on that engine though, so I'm definitely gonna keep this. I had every intention of at least partially disassembling this bottom end, pulling a couple caps, looking at bearing shells, but you know what? I don't think that's necessary at all. The caps have nice movement to them. The crank spins beautifully. Doesn't seem to have excessive end play or anything like that. I don't see any debris coming out of any of these bearings. I still have to check the pan for bits. I really don't think we're gonna find anything though. Very small bits of debris here. There is a bit of fine metallic stuff in this oil. I think I choose not to worry about that. I did find one piece of metal. Almost seems like a ball bearing or something.
or broken off piece of something.
Well, that's neat. It's part of a very small bolt or a stud. Oops, I dropped it, but it was broken on both ends.
There's no more bits of bolt in here though.
Who knows where that came from? I'm gonna have to drop this engine down again before too long here. So I decided to drop the oil pump and pickup out of the way. There's a little support bracket that goes to the pickup and bolts to the number 3 main cap, so I took that off, obviously. And then the 4 bolts that held the pump to the block. When it dropped down, I tore the gasket, of course. Gonna have to buy or make one of those. And this shaft that drives it dropped down as well. It's kind of interesting. It's just a flat bar with a 90-degree twist in it. It's also kind of worn. Interesting. Pulled the filter housing and the big lines. With that out, I can finally pull this ground cable out. Oh, I found this block drain was left open for years, so I took the liberty of closing it. Future Jamie will definitely thank me for that. Couple more things I'd like to pull off here. Maybe the crankcase breather. It's not really in the way of anything, but if it was off, I could throw it in the ultrasonic cleaner, and that would be nice. These ruined engine mounts need to go. I don't know what I'm going to do for new ones. Might have to make those. This gear case is the last big piece that I do want to get off of here. Currently, I'm not sure how to do that. I think this pump drive thing could probably stay in place, but I'd have to unbolt it from the cover. And one of the bolts is perfectly blocked by this stupid engine mount bracket. It might actually come off with the inner timing cover. This looks like a crimped piece where they're like stuck together. I don't even know. I also don't yet know how it attaches to the block back here. I think I'd rather leave that undisturbed. Pulling this mount bracket is going to be absolutely stupid. It's 4 gigantic nuts, none of which you can reach with a socket. I'm also entirely sure we're going to need to put a rear main seal in this thing, so I need to get that cap off of there as well. Aside from those couple things, we're pretty much there. This engine looks way better than I expected it would. We know we need this other cover off the old engine. We need a timing chain. I have a headset for it. I need every other gasket that's not included in that, so I may well just have to order a full engine gasket kit. And then we'll have a spare head gasket. You know, for next time. Let us all hope there is not a next time. I think that's pretty much all the new parts I'm going to need. Everything else will either go right back on this engine or come off of the other one. It's definitely going to be a few days before I can get these parts ordered. The budget for hot rod stuff is very much gone this month. Something about an unexpected couple $1,000 expense for this 426 block. Among other things. Oh, I also ended up paying for these shiny new heads that are sitting on my 361 engine for the 57 Coronet. Alan cleaned all the pretty tinware parts for this thing too. That'll be going together probably really soon, actually. I've made some more progress on my Slant 6 project. Not a lot, though. Haven't touched that one. Remind me to touch that one. Well, it's dinner time once again, so I suppose this is as natural a stopping point as any. Next on this project, I'll be going through this cylinder head, ordering all those things I just said, and getting this Perkins ready to go back in the Perky. I'm pretty excited for that. I bet a lot of you are too. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this. Until next time, as ever, thank you very much for watching. And remember, 4 in a row, it's probably going to be really slow. Now I just have to clean this gigantic, horrible mess.